There was a special recruitment for the 1948 batch of the IS. It was called the emergency recruitment. And Mr. P.C. Alexander joined the 48 batch and was placed 10th in the list of 31 candidates. And their training started on 29th October 49. Mr. Alexander has had the distinction of serving as principal secretary to two prime ministers, Indira Gandhi and Rajiv Gandhi. He also became our High Commissioner to the UK. He was also the governor of Tamil Nadu, later of Maharashtra, and he also became a member of parliament in the Rajya Sabha representing the state of Maharashtra. But when it comes to his tenure as the prime minister, it came to an abrupt halt on account of the involvement of his personal staff in the infamous Coomar Narayanan spying scandal, in which aides and associates of India's top mandarins, both in the PMO and in the president's estate, president's house, and the Ministry of Defense, were caught sharing photocopies of confidential defense documents with the defense attaches of France, Germany, Poland, and the Soviet Union. Now, obviously, Mr. Rajiv Gandhi did not find that he was personally to blame for this, and nobody has actually accused Mr. Alexander of being involved in the spy scandal, but such was the gravitas, such was the allegations of those times that he had to resign. But Mr. Rajiv Gandhi immediately made him our High Commissioner to the UK. But as far as his tenure in the PMO is concerned, opinion is equally divided. Because B.D. Pandey, for example, who wrote In the Service of Free India, as well as the book by R.I. Singh, Turmoil in Punjab, that does not paint the PMO of those times in good light, because there was a lot of confusion, there was a lot of infighting that was happening. The governance was not at its prime in those days. But one must say that Mr. Alexander had the ability to get along with political people, with the top political leadership of all parties, and therefore he was on good terms with the Congress, with the BJP, with the Shiv Sena, and with the NCP. He was his own Boswell. He wrote his own autobiography. In fact, he's penned 3 books, all of which have a lot of biographic detail, and those are My Years with Indira Gandhi, The Perils of Democracy, and Through the Corridors of Power. But, rather than celebrate his achievements, by the end of his career, Alexander was a bitter man. He felt that he deserved even more. He felt that he could have been, rather, he should have been the president of India. And he felt that he could not become the president because of a whisper campaign led by elements within the Congress who felt that with him as the Christian president, or the first Christian president, the chances of Sonia Gandhi also to be the prime minister would get affected, because you couldn't have had the Christian as the president and a Christian as the prime minister. That's what Alexander felt. In any case, the consensus candidate from both the UPA and the NDA in those elections, that is the elections in 2002, was none else than Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, one of India's most successful presidents. The person who succeeded him was Sarla Grewal. She was the second female officer from the 1952 batch of the IS, and she had broken many a glass ceiling. She was the first deputy commissioner of Shimla, which was then the capital of undivided Punjab. She was also the first one to head the PMO, but it must be mentioned that her rank was not principal secretary. She was only given the rank of secretary. But she did inspire a generation of civil servants, especially girls, to take up the civil services exam. But the one lady who's always held a grudge against her is Rupan Deol Bajaj, the feisty IS officer from Punjab, who took cudgels against KPS Gill and had filed charges of sexual assault and molestation against him. However, Grewal could never exercise the sort of power which her predecessor and her successor did. And there were 2-3 reasons for this. The first was that there was a trio of 3 parliamentary secretaries. They were called the Amar Akbar Antony of the PMO. This was Arun Singh, Ahmed Patel and Oscar Fernandez. And the second reason was, and perhaps the most substantial reason, was the personality and the coordination ability of the then Cabinet Secretary, Mr. B.G. Deshmukh. Deshmukh was a year senior to her. And incidentally, after his superannuation, he came in as the principal secretary to the Prime Minister. And he had the rare distinction of serving 3 prime ministers, although his tenure was only for 1 year and 259 days. And the 3 PMs that he worked with were Rajiv Gandhi of the Indian National Congress, Vishwanath Pratap Singh of the Janata Dal, and Chandrasekhar, who ran a coalition with outside support of the Congress. But these were some of the most momentous years for the country. There was a great churn in Indian polity that was taking place. The Mandal Commission had just been implemented, and there was a major unrest, especially amongst the student community. Now, I have been privileged to deliver the 11th B.G. Deshmukh Memorial Lecture on 28th July 2022 at MIIT, at the School of Governance at MIIT Pune. And therefore, while I was preparing for that session, I read through all his 3 books. His 3 books are A Cabinet Secretary Thinks Aloud, A Cabinet Secretary Looks Around, as well as Pune to the Prime Minister's Office. It's very important to note that he insists that civil servants must write their memoirs, not for themselves, not for their own self-glorification, but for posterity. Because in his opening chapter, he writes, and the title of the chapter is To Write or Not to Write, he says, quote, to write one's memoirs after retirement, and sometimes even while in service, has been a tradition with the civil servants in India for a long time. Some of the memoirs written by ICS officers have become classics. They are in any case standard reference material for the concerned period, unquote. BGD was very fond of reading, and we know of it because I was posted at the Lal Bahadur Shastri Academy of Administration in the late 90s. And he was the one who introduced the whole concept of training, the mid-career training program. He was a great votary of in-service training, and he suggested that ministries should earmark at least 1% of their budget on training. He was very clear about civil servants being voracious readers or reading material other than cabinet notes and railway timetables. He said that you should take a week off and only read books. So that's what that's my very great fondness of B.G. Deshmukh. Another point that I want to share is that although he was not directly involved in the establishment of the National Security Agency, it was he who pointed out that the lack of such an agency in the Cabinet Secretariat and the PMO meant that different departments of the government would take different responses. I mean, they had to work in silos. For example, he noted that during the Gulf War, there was no coordination between the MEA, the MHA, the MOD, the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, and our economic ministries. We had actually decided to close our mission in Kuwait. The MEA had taken that decision, but this had been done without any reference to the PMO, which is not one of the best things to happen. Finally, it was a decade later that another principal secretary to the Prime Minister, Brijesh Mishra, who incidentally was his batchmate from the IFS, he became India's first NSA. The career, as we are aware, that whenever there's a change in prime ministers, there's a change of guard in the PMO also. And although he had been the principal secretary to Chandrasekhar also, within a month of his taking over, the baton was passed on to Mr. S.K. Mishra from the Haryana cadre. And he again has written his memoirs, which is called his autobiography is called Flying in the High Winds. And he is the one who really transformed Haryana. I mean, the Haryana tourism that we see, a lot, the intact that we see today, the NIFT that we see today, is all the contribution of Mr. S.K. Mishra. In the words of Natwar Singh, who reviewed his book, and I quote, he says, S.K. Mishra worked with three formidable chief ministers, Devilal, Bansilal, and Bhajanlal. He not only managed to survive all three, he won their confidence. Something more than tact was required to achieve this feat. And he adds, quote, Haryana and tourism were strangers till his arrival. In a short time, tourism gripped Haryana with inhabitable rest houses and classy eateries. The roads became motorable and electricity failure was rare, unquote. Flip side to it was that corruption became deeply entrenched in the system. The ends became more important than the means. And that's something, which can be said about the political climate of those times as well. Let's also look at Mishra's understanding of Chandrasekhar. Quote, Chandrasekhar was an extremely down-to-earth leader, possessing the humility and understanding of Mahatma Gandhi. The legacy of both Nehru and Gandhi was apparent in his personal and political courage. He defied Indira Gandhi, who sent him to jail. But as in the case of Gandhi and Nehru, he bore no personal animosity, against the British. On his, that is Chandrasekhar's release, he showed not the slightest ill will towards Mrs. Gandhi. As I just mentioned, Mr. Mishra also helped build institutions like the Intact, and his contribution to making tourism the growth driver of economy is acknowledged even by those who found his working style to be abrasive and roughshod. During his tenure in Intact, he enlarged the scope of its activities, set up many new divisions to keep pace with the expanding horizon of heritage conservation. And Intact today is one of the most important knowledge institutions of the country with its feet on the ground. And for that, we have to be grateful to Mr. S.K. Mishra.